Hi everyone, welcome to Northern Zen Yoga. My name is Sandra, and today we're going to be talking about the hips. The hips seem to be the problem that we have, especially as we get older, the most in getting into our yoga practice with. The problem is that a lot of our life has been spent doing things that are not good for your hips, that actually increase the chances of you developing osteoarthritis in the hip joint. Or at the very, very least, developing shortening of the tendons and the ligaments that attach itself to the hip joint. Now, before we begin talking about how to fix that problem, I think it's important to understand how the hip is connected to the body and where the hip actually is. A lot of people are not really aware of where the actual hip joint is in their body. So let's have a look at the hip. To begin with, the hip is not this bone that we feel right here. A lot of people say, oh, here are my hips, the hip bones. But really, your hip is down here. This big, meaty area, you can feel it. You slide from your hip bone down about 4 inches, about the length of your fingers or so. You'll start to feel a little lump there, a hard mass. If you press into your flesh, you'll feel it. And this is where the actual joint of the hip is. Attached to this spot is a lot of muscles and a lot of tendons and fascia that help to support this particular joint so that it doesn't get injured easily. The reason why we have arthritis grow in this hip is because the wear and tear on the joint over a lifetime starts to affect the smoothness of the surface of the hip joint. Now, if you don't know what a hip joint actually looks like, if you take your arm and you imagine that this is your thigh bone, this big bone that goes from knee up to here, and your wrist is the top of the thigh bone, and attached to it is this extra piece of bone that comes out, and at the end it's got a joint that's like a round knob. And if this is your hip, where the cup is, where it fits into the body, then this is how the hip joint works. It's this nice round, smooth action as it rolls up and down into the joint, allowing you to do all of the wonderful things that your hip can do and your leg, by extension, appears to be able to do. So what happens if you sit for long, long periods of time throughout the day in your job, then all of the tendons and all of the muscles and all of the ligaments that help to keep this stabilized, help keep this joint from this falling out, start to shorten up, get tighter, so that when you do stand up and you do move, you feel it because you're trying to pull those joints and muscles that have over time got shorter and tighter and tighter. The other big thing is the fascia. Fascia is this new kind of word that we're throwing around, especially in yoga. But what it really is, it's just the connective tissue that connects muscles and tendons to bone. It's like it becomes this viscose, this strong material that attaches itself to the bone and then becomes part of the bone to reinforce its ability to take the strain that walking, running, biking, all of those things we love to do, dancing, can take the strain of it without the joint coming apart. So, having said that, the fascia often is the culprit that causes us the most discomfort because it is very, very dependent on movement in order for it to stay moist. It's this kind of material that if you think about cling wrap, you think about pulling cling wrap, you can pull it. It has an ability to stretch, and after you stretch it, it doesn't come back exactly the same. It's a little bit looser. Well, that's what your fascia is like, unless it starts to lose moisture, and then it becomes rigid, and it becomes hard, and it becomes much more like wax paper or parchment paper, where it hasn't got any stretchability whatsoever, or very, very little. So what happens is when we start to move our body, move our joints, we bring moisture, we bring blood, and we bring all the fluids that are attached to the blood into the fascia, starts to absorb the moisture from that, and it becomes more elastic, more stretchable. So sitting for long periods of time, watching television for long periods of time, like think about your typical day when you were working. For example, you probably got up, got in your car, or caught a bus or train, and you went to work, and you're sitting for the period of time that it took you to get from home to work. And then you go into your job, especially if you have a sit-down job, and even if you have a standing all-day job, and you are in one position the entire day except for your breaks and lunch hour when you go out and move around a little bit. But other than that, you are in a sitting position all day. Then, at the end of the day, you turn around and you go home and you repeat the process of sitting, whether it's in the car or a bus or a train, till you get back to your house. And then you make dinner, you sit down, have your dinner. And then because we're tired, because we've had a long day, we usually will sit and watch television for the next several hours. By the time you hit retirement age, those hips have really tightened up. And now you're deciding, I have all kinds of time to do things like play tennis, do sports, ride a bike, and your hips are saying, forget it. I'm not doing that because it hurts too much. Maybe you even decide that you're going to stay in that sedentary type of lifestyle because it's just too painful to move the hip joints around. They're tight, they're achy. At the end of the day, they hurt. And that's why it's so important for you at this point in time, even no matter what age you are, whether you're 55 or 85, to start moving the joint. Yoga can help you do that. And today I'm going to show you just a couple of movements that will help you to get that joint moving. Very gentle, very slow, and it'll do the trick. So stay tuned. I'll be right back. Hi, welcome back. Let's have a look at what the hip actually is able to do, the actual movements that the joint of the hip can make. For example, the obvious one is our leg can go back and forth. This is to help us walk, taking a step forward or taking a step backward. Our joint is designed to hinge back and forth. It's also designed to hinge to the side and to the center, across, back and forth this way. This is for us to be able to cross our over and to pivot and turn effectively. And also, a lot of these movements are necessary because at one time we needed to climb and we needed to get out of the way of predators and we needed to escape very quickly from somebody who was threatening us. And so the actions of our hip was designed with all of these big muscles that are attached to it to give us strength and speed so that when we needed to, we could move and get going. The other thing our hip can do, and it's a very subtle movement, is we can turn our heel out so that our toes are pointing away from us, or we can turn our heel so that our toes are pointing the opposite direction. This is called external rotation and an internal rotation. And this tiny little movement is one of the most important ones to get back because this movement is such a subtle movement. This is the one that if it's stiff and sore here, you're going to really feel it and injure yourself if you have to suddenly turn your leg. For example, say you're walking in the wintertime and you slip, or slip even on a little bit of water and your foot slides out. Your heel slides away from you and you twist here at the hip. If this is a locked in joint, this is going to not only hurt a lot, but you could risk actually fracturing the top of your hip or dislocating the hip, even worse. Having to work with a hip once it's broken or dislocated is, especially as we age, is really not something you want to ever experience because of the fact that you will be immobile for a long period of time. And it will force you not only to be bedridden, but also risk all of the things that can happen with a lack of movement, such as pneumonia or anything of that nature. I don't want to go too deeply into that kind of stuff because we're not here to talk about what our health issues are. We're here to talk about getting ourselves back into shape again. So let's look at something we can do on a regular basis, either with a chair or if you have a door frame or a wall handy where you can put your hand onto it to get your hip moving again. So let's just try this action of shifting our weight so that our foot is just off the floor and just swinging the leg forward and backward, getting some fluid in there. And this is what this is about. This is not so much about I'm going to try to push myself till I can stretch it to my biggest stretch, but it's more about just getting the juices flowing, getting the moisture, starting the blood flow coming to the hip joint. So 4 or 5 back and forths. And the reason why we've got our hand here on the wall is simply to keep our balance. If you feel like you could do this without the wall, you want to practice a little balancing, keep a wall handy. You don't want to fall. And we'll just work with this. The other thing we want to do is come in and out, in and out. Swinging the leg inward and swinging the leg outward. Getting some movement going. And down. And then we're going to do the ankle twist. Just think about focusing on your toe, pointing your toe in and pointing your toe out. Back and forth. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to lift up the leg. You can use your hand to help you if you need to. Bringing it up toward the chest and bringing it down again. And you're going to feel the other hip starting to strain maybe a little bit because you've been putting a lot of weight on this side and it's having to now work some of the muscles around the top of the hip and the glutes to give you that stability. If you feel them twitching and twerking, that's okay because that means they are working hard. And let's drop that down. We're going to switch sides now. So you can either turn around or you can find something, or maybe you want to hold on to that same wall, and we're just going to swing our foot back and forth. Finding a place where we feel comfortable in this action, not trying to go too high. Even if you're just doing this and this feels like, oh, that's the range you have today, that's okay. With repeating this movement every day, you'll find that your range will start to get a little bit longer and farther. And then let's go back and forth. And the same thing here. If you're just getting a little movement like this and you can feel it in your joint, you're doing it. That's okay. And now we're going to twist. And the same thing here, you see me, I've got a pretty good rotation here at the top now, but there was a time when just doing this was about all I could manage. So don't be hard on yourself. If your hips are not able to move a great deal right now, that's okay. It's okay because as long as you're starting to move it, that's all we worry about. That's really all that's important. And we'll drop that down. And we'll bring our knee up. Just a couple of times here. Now the other thing is when we're doing this is a weight-bearing exercise. So keep in mind that weight-bearing exercises help to build bone mass. Yoga does not normally have extra weights added to the program. You can add small hand weights or ankle weights if you have the kind that kind of strap around your leg and you want to add that muscle building factor to it. But just the weight of your leg alone is really enough weight bearing in the beginning for you to start to not only get the joint moving, but to start to work on getting some more bone mass created. Bone mass is created by the gravitational pull on the body as we try to resist it. So whether it's got extra weight or not, The extra weight just helps build muscle mass, but not necessarily that much more efficient at building bone mass. So now that we've got these hips warmed up, we're going to do just a couple of exercises, stretching and yoga that is going to particularly work on this part right here. That's this particular muscle that goes from the front of your hip down into your leg, and it kind of attaches way back in here. It's like a big elastic band that comes from here, and it goes in underneath into your pelvis. This is called your psoas. It's actually spelled beginning with a P. So if you do look it up, it's because, and you can't find it under S, it's because it begins with P, PS. So the psoas muscle is a really small but important muscle that helps us with the stability of keeping our hips from floating around too much. And quite often when we're sitting, these shorten up. And so that the action of standing up, you would feel them pulling right here when you go to stand up. So we're going to stretch that out. And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a minute. So we're going to begin by coming down onto our mat. And if you can't do it on the mat, I'm going to show you a way you can do the same exercise with a chair. But we're going to begin by assuming that everybody can get down onto the mat. If you want to, use a chair, use the wall to help you get down without injuring yourself. And we're going to work on stretching out the front of the hip, this muscle right here. So I'm just going to move my things out of the way. We're going to come into what's called a low lunge. So putting your foot forward like this and making sure that your knee and your ankle are either in line or that the ankle is slightly in front of the knee joint. When you look down, you should be able to see your top half of your foot. The back leg is going to be in a position where we're kneeling and again, straight down from hip to knee. And then we're going to come into this by folding forward, and here is where, if you need to, you can use blocks here. 2 blocks. We're going to come forward, and we're going to, till we can feel a stretch back here. You may need to readjust your knee, and if you have tight knees, you can certainly put a blanket or a pad underneath your knee, or even fold up your mat till it's up around your knees so that you can kneel on them. And we're going to stretch out. So we're lunging in toward our chest, toward our knee, but we're always being mindful that we don't end up doing one of these. What I don't want you to do is this, where your knee is in front of your foot. You have to keep your foot ahead of your knee all the time. So you may have to scooch this foot forward if you feel like you're actually passing your foot in the lunge. This is going to stretch out the front here. You're going to feel this part here stretching as you let your weight slip forward. We switch sides now, changing sides. And again, my knee is either just behind my ankle or in line with my ankle, but being mindful that I have to make sure that that stays constant. That if I'm moving anything, I'm moving this leg back in order to keep things in line. So I'm just going to slide my leg back a little bit, get a little more angle on it. Now I've got my blocks here to support me. And I'm going to let my hips drop down, let my weight come down till I feel the stretch in the front of my hip. And come back down. If you like at this point, you can come into child pose, or you can come onto your bottom to give your, if you don't want to be kneeling any longer. If you're able to, you can sit back. You put a block here to sit back onto. Just give the front of your body a little bit of rest. And then from this position, and again, you must take care of your knees, so make sure that you have yourself in such a position on the mat that your knees, if you're on the floor, if you're out in a place where the floor is very hard, that you are able to have comfort there, because we're going to put some weight here into the knees. So we're going to put our hands behind us and we're going to push our hips forward And it's getting pretty warm in here, so I'm going to take this off. Take off my jacket for a minute. So you can either put your hands on your back like this, or you can put your hands behind like this. If you can't reach behind, simply put your hands on your back. And we're going to push the pelvis forward. I wish I had a tighter shirt on so that you can probably see this better. So that till we feel that stretch up in here. So pushing our hips forward as much as we can. Now, if you just tip back a little bit and you're feeling a stretch here or any pain in your back, that's probably enough for you today. You don't need to go any farther than that. So if you can, though, keep pushing the hips forward until you feel the stretch coming up here. We're just going to breathe into that and hold it for a few breaths, inhaling and exhaling. And then we're going to come down, back onto the mat, and then we're going to come up one more time. And come back down again. I'm going to show you now how to do this same movement with a chair. Give me a second. So here we are working within the chair now. So standing up, you're going to put your one foot forward, making sure that if you are going to rest your knee against the chair, that your foot is underneath the chair a little more. You can put a pad here if you like. And then we're going to drop our knee toward the floor using the chair as a way for us to support ourselves to do this. You can also do this. And you're just going to let your knee come down until you feel that stretch happening from the hip to the knee. And come back up again. Switch sides. Another way you can do this is by sitting on the chair and stretching this leg back. This might be easier for some of you. If the chair is just there for you to be supported, you can use the chair the way I showed you the first time. If you need the chair because getting up and down from the floor is your problem, then you can sit on the side of the chair. So you want to have a chair that does not have an arm here. And you can bring this leg back as far as you can until you feel the stretch in here. So, where is that? Well, yours might be here before you start feeling it. Yours might be here. Or you might be able to slide that foot back a lot farther before you start to feel this pull in here. And you'll feel it. It's right in that spot. And then we'll switch sides. So you just go to the other side of the chair and you slide that leg back until you feel the stretch. So once we've got the stretch happening, make sure you're holding that stretch for a few breaths before you give up. And then take a rest and then repeat it. And repeat it till you have it 3 times. So you're going to do it 3 times on one side and 3 times on the other side. 3 sets. So that's one of the best ways to stretch that particular muscle in the hip. I'm going to have a series of hip stretches for you, but I wanted to start off with that one. And I want you to think about your flexibility in your hip as progress that you have to accomplish. Not worrying about whether or not you look exactly like me when you do it. Make sure that you are using the props that you need in order to be able to accomplish what you need to do the easiest way possible. You want to feel the stretch in your hip. You never want to feel pain. Pain is never anything we're going for. And if you do feel pain, you need to stop doing your yoga immediately, because that is an indicator that you're injuring yourself. So you need to find a way where you can feel the stretch, you can feel what you're doing, but you're not hurting yourself. There's a difference between the achy stretch and pain. Know the difference. Understand it. We want to feel this muscle stretching. We want to feel it, but we don't want to feel sharp, sudden pain happening to our joint. That's never good. So I hope this helped you, and I will have a series of other very short exercises that are very specific to the hip. And if you could just think of it as, I'll do this one today, or maybe I'll do 2 of these today, and then tomorrow I'll do 2 different ones, and the day after maybe I'll go back to the 2 that I did the first day, then it's not one of those things where you're spending enormous amounts of time working on the hip. And also, too, we don't want to over-tire the hip because it's just beginning to wake up when we start yoga. There's a very important thing to keep in mind. When you begin yoga, there's a period of adjustment because your body has never done this before, or if the movements and things that you used to do but you can't do now, it's been a long time since it was able to do those movements. So there's going to be a period of not only resistance at first, where it doesn't feel like you can move very far before you start to feel that achy stretch. But afterwards, the after effects may feel achy for a while, or you might feel the aching in the evening before you go to bed. This is expected. When you have things that haven't moved for a long time, they have to go through the process of opening up into building and tearing and building and stretching. And this has a little bit of a factor of discomfort attached to it. This is when a lot of people give up. Giving up at this stage is, please don't do that. Just don't do it. Because this is where you can really know that you're doing something for yourself. I'm going to show you one more exercise that you can do using a chair that is going to be good for your hips to get the hip opening. So, as we saw when I was showing you the movements of the hip, there's the movement in and out. So we're going to take the right leg and we're going to move it out to the side as far as we can. Here's the corner of the chair. So we're going to try to aim for the corner of that chair. And we're going to plant our foot down wherever we are from dead center to the side. And then we're going to take the other leg and we're going to move that one out as far as we can. Then we're going to take our hands and we're going to place them on the inside of our thighs. And we're gently going to push the legs apart. Now you may not get much movement here. You may not see a big difference. But and don't use it on your knees. Don't press against your knees. Instead, press on the inside, the meaty side of your leg, and push those legs apart. Then we're going to bring the leg back in, and we're going to cross the ankles and squeeze our knees together. Let them relax, and then squeeze them together. And then we're going to bring them back to center. And then we're going to take one leg and we're going to bring it over as far as we can this way. And we can just let this leg just be off to the side for a second. Plant your foot down. Make sure you're not on the side of your foot. Just go as far as you can to where you can push your foot down. And we're just going to do the same thing as we did with the wide legs. And we're going to place our hand against the side of our leg here, and we're just going to push against there and just get a little movement going here. It's not a big movement. There's no big change in what you're doing. If your knee is kind of rolling out, it's just going to straighten the leg back up again. And then we'll draw the other side. So get this leg out of the way. I've got this leg over to the side. I'm actually facing forward. I'm a little bit on more of an angle because I'm looking toward the camera here. But I've got my knee off this way. Dead center is here. And I'm just going to push against the side of my leg, pushing that knee over just a little bit, trying to get a little bit of a stretch happening in this side, on the side of the hip. So just repeat that a few times, and you'll find that these movements will start to slowly become easier, and you'll slowly, and I mean, not quick. It's not going to happen, and you're not going to, if you did it 3 times, you're not going to be much different than you are today. But if you consistently do this over a period of several weeks, you'll find that suddenly your range is going to be a lot different than it is today. So I hope that helped. I'm going to have more for you coming up with different exercises specifically designed for getting the hips to wake up. And be sure that you take good care of yourself, never go into pain. Don't want to see anybody sending me emails saying that what I did today hurt me. You don't want to hurt yourself. Things might get achy, and you might even feel it during the evening or at night, but it shouldn't be pain. It should just be that lovely achiness that tells you that your body is waking up today. See you next time. Bye for now. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Thanks.